Tonight on Newshour, the G7 summit in Canada has taken a dramatic turn. What began as a carefully planned gathering to reinforce unity on Ukraine and global stability has been upended by urgent developments in the Middle East and the unexpected early departure of US President Donald Trump. Citing escalating hostilities between Israel and Iran, President Trump has left the summit ahead of schedule to return to Washington. His withdrawal not only surprised world leaders, but also cast uncertainty over key sessions, particularly those involving Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who had travelled to press for progress on a peace framework with Russia. Well, the situation on the ground in the Middle East is deteriorating rapidly. Trump's absence followed reports that Iran, through Gulf intermediaries, had asked the US to press Israel for a ceasefire, offering flexibility on nuclear negotiations in return. Hours later, Israel intensified airstrikes, including a direct hit on Iran's state broadcaster during a live news segment. Well, Tehran responded by targeting Tel Aviv and Haifa with missiles in the deadliest exchange in years. With the summit's momentum now broken and diplomatic efforts hanging in the balance, we begin tonight with our correspondent Mitch McCann, who has this update from the G7 venue in Alberta.
The last time Canada hosted the G7 summit back in 2018, Donald Trump decided to leave early. Fast forward 7 years to 2025, where the summit is again being held in Canada. Donald Trump has done the same thing, although there are very different circumstances involved this time. The president says he has to get back to the White House to deal with the unfolding and escalating situation in the Middle East that we've seen in recent days between Iran and Israel. The president says it's very important to get back, and it's leading some to speculate what the United States knows or what might be going to happen in the coming hours. So we'll be keeping a close eye on Washington for that. But here at the G7, that situation really overshadowed most of the discussions today. Even on Monday morning, when leaders had arrived to talk to each other, hours before, it was revealed that there is a joint declaration the leaders had signed or agreed to, apart from the United States, involving this situation. The document reportedly suggested things like Israel has the right to defend itself, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and that generally called for a de-escalation in tensions. But US officials said Donald Trump wasn't willing to sign that. Later in the day, the president expressed his frustration that Iran hadn't come to the negotiating table and managed to negotiate a deal to wind down its nuclear weapons program. That really frustrated the president. Later in the day again, he posted on Truth Social that everyone should evacuate Tehran, which is the Iranian capital where 10 million people live. So the situation is certainly escalating, and the White House has decided, so much so, he needs to head back to Washington. And that will disappoint many other world leaders who had been hoping to meet with the president tomorrow. Tomorrow's agenda was really all about Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, had been personally invited by Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney to discuss issues involving a ceasefire or peace negotiations with Russia. Zelensky will not be able to meet Donald Trump now. As well as Zelensky is Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, who wanted to discuss the AUKUS deal, which gives Australia nuclear submarines from the United Kingdom and United States. That deal, or that security alliance, is now being reviewed by the Pentagon. So Anthony Albanese won't be able to have that discussion. So there will be many leaders missing out on time with Donald Trump, but the president has decided he needs to get back immediately to Washington. Mitch McCann for A News, Calgary, Canada.
As diplomatic channels then fall silent and military action intensifies, new information is emerging about efforts behind the scenes to contain the crisis. While world leaders recalibrate their responses, signals from the region suggest a complex and rapidly shifting dynamic. Let's take a look at this story.
Sources say Iran has sent messages through Gulf states to urge US President Donald Trump to pressure Israel to a ceasefire. In return, Tehran says it would show flexibility in nuclear negotiations with the US. It's the latest in the deadliest conflict between longtime enemies Israel and Iran, which have been attacking each other for 5 straight days. On Monday, Israel escalated strikes on a number of targets, They include Iran's state broadcaster. A live broadcast was interrupted by a missile, and a news anchor had to flee the studio. Israel claimed the building was serving as a communications center for Iran's military. Before dawn the same day, Iranian missiles had struck Tel Aviv and Haifa, killing several people. Israel launched its air war with a surprise attack last Friday, killing top Iranian military commanders and nuclear scientists. Its airstrikes have also put at least 2 of Iran's 3 operating uranium enrichment plants out of action. Israel has said its goal is to eliminate Tehran's ability to develop a nuclear weapon. Iran has denied it had plans to build one. Elsewhere on Monday, US President Donald Trump told reporters he was leaving the G7 summit early to return to Washington Monday night, citing the situation in the Middle East. Fox News reported he would convene his National Security Council. Trump has consistently said the Israeli assault could end quickly if Iran agreed to US demands that it accept strict curbs on its nuclear program. In a social media post Monday, Trump reiterated that Iran should have signed a nuclear deal with the United States, and he also urged everyone in Tehran to immediately evacuate.
Okay, joining us now to discuss this further is Ken van Leland, a political commentator in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Ken, thank you so much for joining us on Newshour. Obviously, this is a developing situation, but from what you've seen so far, what is your assessment on the effectiveness of Israel's current military campaign when it comes to that objective of dismantling Iran's nuclear capabilities?
Well, it's a two-pronged approach. First thing is dismantling Iran's ability to produce nuclear weapons. And since the approach is very effective, the second approach is dismantling or annihilating the Iranian government, taking out and toppling the terror regime in Tehran. So it's a grand opportunity, actually.
And we've heard both through President Trump and through other actors reports of Iran offering in some way to negotiate. How should Israel interpret that? Is it a genuine shift, or is it more of a tactical strategy?
Too little, too late. We've seen that Iran has put up a strategy years ago to encircle Israel with proxy armies to harass the Israeli state, the Israeli public. We have seen a war over the last 2 years, infuriated by the regime in Tehran. And now they're paying the price. They started a war, now they get a war. So there is no reason for a ceasefire. It's too little, it's too late.
And in terms of the focus, the precision of the Israeli attacks, I mean, there are critics who will say that striking state media, for example, will cause obvious civilian harm. But from what you've seen so far, from your own evaluation, how do you feel Israel is balancing military necessity with making sure that it aligns to those international legal norms?
Well, you know, we should neglect the crocodile tears that we are facing. We're facing that all the time. The fact actually is the Israelis are attacking the infrastructure, military, political infrastructure in Tehran. The Iranians are attacking civilian population in Israel. They're not attacking the military bases, they're attacking the people. So that's the main difference.
Okay, big difference indeed. So obviously we've got the G7 taking place at the moment. Some of the leaders there have called for restraint. How important right now is international backing for Israel above and beyond the strong relationship with US President Trump?
Well, yeah, as we have discussed before, there's only one threat left in the world, it's the United States. Since Europe, they've been our friends in the past, but with these kind of friends, you don't need any enemies anymore, because they have proven over the last 2 years that they have not been not very trustful. And they're only looking for their own personal interest. Israel is fighting for their own extinction, and this is a war of extinction. And the Europeans are not backing up the Israelis, not anymore. So the only thing what Israel can do is rely on Donald Trump and on the United States as their main friend in the world.
And Ken, there has been lots of discussion about red lines, possible terms in order to begin ceasefire discussions. What red lines do you feel Israel might set, should set, for any ceasefire discussions now to begin in earnest?
Well, ceasefire with Iran or ceasefire with Gaza?
Well, in particular, in this occasion with Iran.
Well, the fact actually is, the Israelis didn't start a war last Friday. This war was started years ago by the Iranians by pummeling Israel with rockets and bombs and terrorist actions for years. I mean, for years. Now Israel is taking action against within the opportunity to actually destroy the capabilities of Iran, and I think they will pursue this objective for the next coming whatever days or weeks in order to achieve these goals, to destroy the Iranian capabilities, the military capabilities, and even if they have the chance with the Americans to topple this regime, that would be a major achievement, and the world would be very happy if this could be realized. So a red line, I don't see any red line on the moment, unless Iran has some other tricks on their sleeves, military sleeves, that will change the game dramatically.
And Ken, of course, Israel, like all countries engaged in military conflict, will have their own strategy, their own plans for how long they expect this to go on. Is there anything that Iran could do, anything that Iran could say, which would interrupt that plan, which would cause Israel to pause perhaps and stop the execution of its current strategy?
Well, I don't see any objective for the Iranians. It's too late, too little, too late. They're bombing Israeli cities. They're bombing civilians. I mean, what can we expect from them? It's a terror regime. And I think that the Iranian population, the majority, will be very happy if we topple them.
Okay. It's very interesting. Thank you for your analysis. We do appreciate you joining us from the Netherlands. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
Staying in the Netherlands, our next guest will be very familiar to A News viewers. Our very own Anita Sharma is joining us now from Arnhem. Anita, always good to see you, always great to speak to you. Let's pivot now.
Thank you, likewise, Mac.
Let's pivot now to the G7. President Trump has left early, saying he had to deal with the obvious situation in the Middle East. Do you think that his move helped calm things, or in a way just added to the uncertainty?
Well, does the U.S. president ever calm things? I'd probably go with the scenario that it looks like there will be more of an escalation. It's quite dramatic. The fact that first there were questions about whether he would attend the G7. He, of course, as it turns out, did attend, but he now leaves early, and he leaves with some very dramatic quotes. One of which is, and I quote, "You're going to find out over the next 2 days, you're going to find out nobody slowed up so far." Of course, he's referring to the Israeli-Iran conflict. He's made no secret of the fact that he is behind Israel. He's made no secret of the fact that Iran, he says, cannot be close to having a nuclear weapon. The question is, what will happen next with the United States? I don't want to connect the dots here, but there are a few more things that I believe Israel would want, especially from the United States. And there's one thing that analysts are talking about, and that is bunker busters, a type of munition that so far only the US has the capability to detonate, to drop from its planes. Now, if the U.S. were to provide this to Israel in this fight with Iran, it would essentially mean that the U.S. would directly be part of this war instead of right now some sort of heavy diplomacy action, mainly working with Israel and mainly talking down to Iran. Will that situation change? That remains to be seen. But the only other point I would add to that, Guy, is the fact that if the United States does, the more the United States participates in any which way, in any which form with Israel against Iran, what will happen here is you'll have MAGA supporters, right, the Make America Great Again supporters in the United States, quite irate, quite upset, because from the beginning, Trump has been very cognizant of the fact that MAGA supporters are not interested in engaging wars outside of their territory. So if this continues to escalate, that is something that Trump will also have to be dealing with on a grassroots level with his supporters.
Now, Anita, it's reasonably rare that you and I talk about President Trump without also talking about things he's posted online, and today is no exception. What do you make of this call for people in Tehran to evacuate immediately? Again, is he hinting that he has some inside knowledge of something? Is it a genuine call for the safety of people? What do you read into that?
I wonder if it's a combination of both, Guy. I wonder if there is, on behalf of the U.S. administration, some concern over Iranian citizens. There's a big diaspora of Iranians in Canada, my home country, as well as the United States. So I wonder if that's part of it. But the other part is, like I said, as he left the G7 summit hastily, he did say that watch out, there's going to be some developments over the next 2 days. What will those developments mean? We know that at the end of the day, when Trump says, look, he wants Iran to come to the table and have nuclear discussions, nuclear talks, the big question there is that going to be enough for Israel? I think it's a rhetorical question. The answer to that is no. There's a strong belief that what will satisfy Israel is essentially an elimination of the regime there, or as they call it, the dictatorship. The Ayatollah Khomeini, a lot of his top leaders, his top echelon of commanders have been annihilated, killed by Israel. We know that leading scientists, nuclear scientists, have been taken out. So where will this end? Is it enough now for Israel to basically have the U.S. start, quote unquote, nuclear talks with Iran? So that remains to be seen what happens on that front. The other point I would mention is it looks like this type of an attack was years in the making. This wasn't just a surprise, or it was a surprise attack, but it wasn't a hastily planned one by all indications. So for all the years that this has been planned, an unprecedented attack, we should say, whether it will end soon, it's 5 days in now. Whether it will end soon, we don't know. Whether Israel will be satisfied with just nuclear talks, that seems unlikely, but let's see.
And Anita, I'd be really interested to get your view on what you've seen when it comes to the chemistry, the relationship between President Trump and the other G7 leaders. There is some obvious warmth with Prime Minister Starmer, President Macron, the German Chancellor, but also President Trump setting himself as special and different too. What do you make of the chemistry, the differences between that group?
I think it's an evolving situation. You mentioned Keir Starmer of the UK, as well as Macron of France. Maybe they're signing on a bit more fervently, if you will, for lack of a better word, to the Trump agenda than other leaders. But at the end of the day, I think the whole who's an ally right now of the United States? When Donald Trump re-entered, I should say, the White House, he made it very clear from the onset that allies, the United States traditional allies, would have to step up in a way that he found to be satisfactory. He tore once again the NATO map, the treaty with Europe as well as Canada. He looked at Canada, again, my home country, and said, hey, we have to revise this relationship because so far, from his point of view, it's been an unfair trade relationship.
And just on that, sorry to butt in there, Anita. Sorry to interrupt. Just on that, though, it's very, very interesting. Has Prime Minister Carney, what sort of a job do you think he's done when it comes to managing President Trump? I mean, he's now in this position where he is the host. He's inviting the president in. How do you evaluate how he has managed that relationship over the last few months?
I would say, I was on your show when he entered the race. I was on your show when the election was won by Carney. He didn't get the majority, but he came pretty close. And here we are with him leading this G7 summit in Kananaskis, beautifully situated in the gorgeous province of Alberta in Canada. What I would say is, look, diplomacy is his middle name, right? He's been the central bank governor of Canada as well as England. He's been the chairman of one of the biggest alternative asset managers in the world, Brookfield Asset Management. He's got close ties with diplomats, prime ministers and presidents in Europe, as well as in Asia. So what I would say is, so far it seems like Trump has been willing to sit with Carney and at least hear him out. You may recall Carney was at the White House, had a meeting with Donald Trump, I believe at least a month ago, and there Trump had joked about the 51st state, Canada once again becoming the 51st state. Not a funny joke as far as Canadians are concerned. And Carney made it very clear there, as diplomatically as he could, that no, that wouldn't be happening. He said to Donald Trump, just like some key areas are not for sale, i.e. Buckingham Palace, a nod to the UK, he said Canada is not for sale. So he's held his own, many would say, but let's see what happens moving forward. Trump did show up to the G7 summit. I think he'll take that. Carney's team will take that as a win, but he also left early. How does he view Macron? How does he view Starmer? How does he view Carney? I think as long as they are seemingly willing to play ball with Trump, they'll be in his good books. But as soon as someone says something perhaps slightly contrary to what Trump believes or irates him in any way, shape, or form, you'll see Trump turn on a dime. We've seen that in the first term, and we continue to see that now. Just one more note on Macron, though. He did say Trump was leaving early to work on a ceasefire deal. We know that Trump shot back pretty quickly with the press and said, no, that's not the case. There's something bigger than that I'm working on right now, and that necessitates me getting back to DC ASAP. So let's see how all this plays out, Guy.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. And just quickly on that, Anita, the President Trump has suggested that this could all be over very quickly if Iran were to agree to US demands on nuclear talks. Do you think that would be the end of it? Or do you sense that Israel potentially may have other strategies, other ideas? Is it as simple as that, do you think?
It's what I said earlier, Guy. I think a lot of analysts might agree with me that I don't think if Iran agrees to nuclear talks that that'll be enough to satisfy Israel. We know, like I said, that the top echelon of Iran's military was essentially killed, decimated by Israel. They have the Ayatollah Khomeini straight in their eyes now, straight as a target. Of course, Israel's not saying what it plans to do next. Why would it? It's all intensely quiet, hush-hush operations on the strategy front. But you'd be hard-pressed to wonder if they would just be interested, after all these years of planning a full-scale attack like this, if they'd be interested in settling for just nuclear talks with Iran. They'd probably say, we've been there, we've done that before. Where has this led? What has this done? Now they're taking possibly advantage of a situation where the key allies, that the front line, if you will, that Iran would traditionally rely upon, I'm talking about Hezbollah here, some regional proxies like Hezbollah, as well as Hamas, well, they've essentially been neutralized now by Israel. So this is, like I said, years in the making. There were key dominoes that had to fall before they could take this critical step of launching this full-scale attack on Iran. It's in full motion. It's in full play. We're on the 5th straight day now. Will it stop? It remains to be seen, but like Donald Trump said, there's more news to come, especially within the next 2 days, a move that facilitated or necessitated his having to leave Kananaskis, Alberta, for DC. So let's see.
Yeah, let's see indeed. Anita, whether you are in this studio or over there in Western Europe, we love to hear your analysis. Thank you very much for joining us. Okay, that brings us to the end of this edition of Newshour. A G7 summit then overshadowed by sudden exits and shifting alliances, and a conflict in the Middle East growing more volatile by the hour, where we'll continue tracking developments as they unfold. That is all for this edition of Newshour from all of us here at A News. Thanks for being with us.